4 things to do to your finances before 2023.
It's Brian Preston, the money guy.
Brian, I'm excited about this because a lot of people think once the year is coming to an end, once it's getting close to the end of the year, maybe the time has already passed where I can do any meaningful planning, where I can do things that really have a big impact. But we think end of the year can be one of the most exciting times because it gives you an opportunity to not only position yourself for what's gone on this year, but to also think about how do I want to be positioned coming into the new year.
Well, all my procrastinators, raise your hand. This is the point where this is game time. I mean, these guys, by the way, just to let y'all open up the curtain, a little transparency on show prep. We write all these show notes. We have all these content meetings, but they know game time Brian shows up on the day of recording where I can see things more clearly. I really have a vision that I don't have when we're doing those meetings that are 2 weeks ahead or 3 weeks ahead. I think it's that way for many people with their own personal finances. So this is the time to kind of game time year-end planning because you're running out of time. So get that hyper focus so you can take advantage of all this stuff.
So we're going to walk you through 4 things that you can do right now before the end of the year to make sure that you are prepared so that you can catch up on some of that procrastination. And the first one is really, really important. I think it's really important, Brian, just given how 2022 has played out so far, given how it feels right now out there in the economic environment. And it is, the first thing you can do is know your history.
Yeah, this is one, the biggest thing, because 2022 has been one of those years with a bear market has shown up. We have geopolitical things that are out there causing all kind of volatility. We have, of course, economic volatility. We have a political season that's going on. All these things have you thinking, maybe I need to drive myself into some form of action to react to all this. And we just want to remind you, hey, it's good to know the numbers, know your history, so you can actually know what's noise versus what's actionable.
Yeah, one of the things that we've shared a number of times on here is how quickly that markets can recover. You've seen this illustration before, but we went and looked at all the bear markets we've had since 1950, and we know that the average loss in a bear market in this country is about 35%, and on average, it lasts about 14 months. And we know that when it does turn, it tends to turn very, very quickly.
Now, you guys have seen this. We've shown this slide a lot. I love it because, and I think it's worth repeating the numbers, but we've taken this a completely different level, and I'll give Daniel a lot of credit to that. But you can see 1 month recovery from the bottom, 15%. Close to 15% is the 1 month recovery.
On average.
6 months in the future, on average, is close to 28%. 12 months, it's 44%. 24 months, close to 63%. It's really incredible, but we didn't stop there because y'all have seen this data, and we always like to go, we show you our work. We also go deeper than a lot of other people do with the research. So we want to show you, what does that look like if you put that in context of the range? We gave you the averages, but what's actually the range from the slowest recovery after the bottom of the market to the best recovery? We actually created a visualization so you can actually see that.
And so what's really interesting is we showed, like, for example, 1 month on average after the close of a bear market in the recovery, on average, the market makes back 15% in that first month. But if you look at the quickest return, the most fast recovery that we've seen since 1950, it was actually 27%. Well, even on the slow side, even the slowest recovery past the bottom of a bear market, it was a recovery of 5%. Now, fast forward, think about the first year after a market downturn. We say that on average, in the first year after a bear market, the market makes on average 44%. Well, even in the slowest recovery, the least quick uptick still made 21% over the next 12 months.
Well, I thought this slide was so powerful to me because I can remember the 2008, 2009 recovery, and it was much bigger than what the historical averages were. And I wanted to give some people some context to understand, well, how do you know where we are in the range? Is this going to be a slow recovery? Is this going to be a fast recovery? It's all on the energy that's created in the downturn. Remember, we've talked about whether you want to call it the pluck effect, the rubber band that if you want the visual of pulling the rubber band down, the further and farther away that you pull it to create the most energy, is also going to power that recovery. So pay attention to the clues that are being given to us. If we have all of a sudden, if we're down 25% and we see the historical averages is 35% on a bear market, it wouldn't surprise me is that the last week or two of that bear market might have some intense drops, but the recovery comes back just to match the energy of that downturn.
And so we don't know where we are in this particular market. We don't know how bad it's going to be. And I know a lot of folks are watching this saying, guys, I don't think it's over. I see the statistics. I hear the averages. I don't think it's over. So we wanted to take it a step further, right? Not just looking at, okay, well, what happens after we hit the very bottom? We said, let's look at every time since 1950 that the market has gone into bear market territory, meaning it dropped 20%. What did the subsequent returns look like after that? Not just when we hit the bottom, but once we hit 20%, how did the market perform after that? And what you can see is that on average, after a 20% downturn, not after the close of a bear market, but after the 20% downturn, and some bear markets will have multiple, fits and starts. On average, still 1 year into recovery, market has made back about 14%.
Well, I thought this was inspired. There was a comment out there that said, hey, you guys are always talking about from the bottom of the bear market, but we don't actually know when that day is. Can you guys give us something? Because remember, finance in a lot of ways is like playing horseshoes, meaning that you actually get points for being close. You don't have to hit the ringer to actually win at the game. So I love the fact that we were inspired and we went and pulled the data on it. And it is interesting to understand is just the sheer fact that we've crossed the 20% down threshold actually is a pretty good indicator that we're going to have outsized returns in the coming years, because it's back to this whole pluck effect or pulling the rubber band down, is that as we bring down the actual value of the market, the recovery out is pretty powerful stuff. So we always share that the S&P 500 on an annualized basis, depending upon which periods of time you're looking at, whether it's the 1957 when they added the full 500 stocks to the S&P 500, it's typically around 10.8 to somewhere between that 10 to 11%. Yep. Well, you can quickly look at this and say, wow, these numbers are much bigger than even those historic norms, and it's because of that 20% down. So just to give those who are listening to the podcast, 1 year, 14%, 3 years, 29%, 10 years, 122%. And you can quickly do the math. This is not mathematically perfect, but if you just take 122% divided by 10, that's 12.2%. We all know that it's actually going to be a little bit lower than that because of what is geometric mean and all the other things that go into it. But it's still very powerful to know. A good indicator is that there's actually a silver lining when we hit these periods of volatility.
So this is what we're saying. We don't know if we're at the bottom of this bear market. We don't know if the worst has already come, but we do know that right now, as we sit here today, the market is significantly lower than it was back at the beginning of the year. And if we look at the average, historically, that means that over the next 2, 3, 5, 10, 15 years, there's a really good chance that we could have solid performance inside of the financial markets. But Brian, you have people that keep telling you, yeah, but Brian, this time's different. Something's unique. No. I understand history. I understand the past. But there's something going on about this one.
Yeah, I mean, there's a quote. I mean, go ahead. We have a comment that we could bring up where people tell us we're in a new paradigm.
Yep.
This time is different, guys. You're missing that, and I chuckle a little bit when I hear this. So I think it's important. I'll just read this comment that was given to us on YouTube. It was like, "Thanks for your videos. I really appreciate your advice. I have to disagree with your position on this one, though. We haven't been here before. This is not necessarily an economic bubble bursting or a temporary financial issue, but a deep geopolitical change. There are some chances the world is changing in a time of confrontation, closed economies, and wars. I hope it's not the case, but it's certainly in the realm of possibilities. If this really the world changing, assuming long-term growth would be a mistake." I mean, he might as well said we're in a new paradigm.
This is a new paradigm. This time is different. We've not seen this before is basically what this person's echoing.
So my comment back to him, if you saw this on YouTube, you saw this, is like, so you're saying we're in a new paradigm. with a question mark. This is another indicator I look for in market cycles. If enough folks are saying this, we are getting close to capitulation and the bottom, I will keep buying. And the thing I always, because it's so interesting, we do a lot of studio tours, and we had a client come through, this is probably a month at this point, because I've told this story already, where he's like, man, I wanted to test you guys. I went back and listened to your shows from 2008, 2009, and guess what? I was surprised to hear y'all are saying the exact same things, but you just sound more confident now. And I think the reason that he could say that about the confidence is that, yes, I have been through a number of downturns now. I came out of college in the 90s, was managing money in the 90s, and I have been through the dot-com bubble. I've been through those, the whole pigs when we went through the debt crisis. I've been through the Great Recession. I've been through all these different things, and even the savings and loans crisis of the 90s. I've experienced all these things, and I'm even a kid of the 70s where I can remember when we were worried about nuclear war during the Cold War. There's all these things that there are intersections with the politics. I'll just say the politics, the geopolitical stuff that's going on with countries. And look, as long as human nature has the ability to keep growing and expanding, we're going to be okay. That's why I have this optimism for the future, is because I just believe in humans. I mean, if you talk about law of accelerating returns, we're actually, through innovation, changing the world at a faster pace, not a slower pace. If you think about how the world's changing from a technology, economic standpoint, from your ability to invest, it's actually improved. It's all getting better. So don't be negative just because, yes, there are some troubling things with the political world. There's troubling things with the geopolitical world. There's troubling things in the economic cycle. That's kind of normal. And I don't want you to get sidetracked just because you've started investing in the last 10 to 15 years and you're not used to this stuff.
So we know that past performance does not guarantee future performance, but we can learn a lot from the past, and we can learn a lot from understanding how markets have behaved and how resilient they've been. So the first thing you can do when it comes to preparing for the end of the year, thinking about next year, is to know your history. Here's the second thing that you can do before the end of the year to really help boost your financial life. It's understand that tax season ends on 12/31, not April 15th. So the tax planning that you ought to be doing should be taking place right now, not the week before you get ready to pay your taxes next year.
When we've done tax shows at year-end, tax planning shows specifically, we've done whole shows on this, not just a section of a full show. I can go ahead and summarize this very quickly. Typically, with year-end tax planning, you want to be deferring income that you can, and you want to be accelerating deductions. So all my procrastinators, once again, this is your opportunity to really think about what can you do to make your income situation seem as low as possible, but your deductions come up as fast as possible so you get more benefits out of both of those things.
So even though that's kind of the general overarching advice, and that holds true in most tax planning environments, we wanted to walk you through some of the things that we look at, some of the things that we as advisors think about as we come to the end of the year. We're going to talk a little bit about what they are and how you might be able to use them. The first we've talked a ton about, loss harvesting. Obviously, when we have losses in the market, there's a great opportunity for us to go sell those loss positions, capitalize on those losses, and buy a similar but not identical holding. So if I have a small cap index, I might want to sell that and buy a different small cap index, international, and so on. By doing that, we don't change the overall investment allocation, the structure of our investments, but we change the individual holdings so that we can capitalize on those losses, and we can use those losses to offset all capital gains that we have this year. If we do all that, then we can still do $3,000 of ordinary income, and if we still have some left over, we can carry it into future years. So it makes sense when it comes to losses to get while the getting's good. And unfortunately, the getting has been real good this year for losses.
Yeah, and if you want to deep dive on this, we did an entire show on loss harvesting. I mean, we fill you to any level you want to know. We've got you covered, so go check out that show. Another thing we always try to do at year-end is capital gain avoidance.
It's a big one.
This year, the distributions aren't as big as they've been in some of the big years where we've had outsized performance. But still, like I know right now I have a few clients that I've got to make some phone calls because they had some sentimental holdings that they had and some other things that aren't a part of our typical stables of funds. But these things are still going to be issuing out like a 13% capital gain or distribution here at year end. That doesn't make sense.
Now, Brian, let me stop you there, because when a lot of people fall into this trap, they say, whoa, hold on, there's a fund that's going to have a 13% distribution. Well, I should go buy that right now because I'm going to get a 13% rate of return as soon as that pays out. Is that the way that it works?
Well, if only it was that simple. We could just go get a list of all the big distributions. Because, by the way, just go ask the people who own the Vanguard Target Retirement funds last year if this strategy worked. It doesn't work because guess what happens? You do get the distribution where you will end up paying the income taxes on that if it's in a taxable account. However, they adjust the net asset value, the NAV of those shares, so that they lower the price to account for the distribution. So no, it's not a win situation. Your market value of the holdings adjust, and it's still worth the same amount. It's just now you owe a bigger tax bill on the portion that was distributed out to you.
I was going to say, the distribution is net neutral. All you are getting is a tax bill. So what is the strategy there? Go look at all your holdings. Go look up all the distributions they're going to have, and if it looks like the distribution is going to pay out is greater than your embedded gain in that holding, perhaps you don't want to stay in that holding through the distribution date so you can avoid that tax payout. That may not be something you want to take on.
Yeah, they do publicly disclose those distribution dates, on the dates that you have to own it, the date that they're going to distribute it. And by the way, they don't love it when you do this strategy. So, that's something that just to being completely transparent, you need to understand the rules that the fund is trying to implement to keep you from doing things like this, because there are some things they do. But pay attention. But it is definitely still a powerful year-end planning thing that you ought to pay attention to if you can avoid these capital gain distributions if you're not actually getting a market value out of it. The other thing we look at is Roth conversion analysis.
Yep. We always think, especially for our folks who have more control over their income, or perhaps you're someone who's retired and you're living off a portfolio income, around this time of year, it makes sense to do a tax projection and just look based on the pension income, Social Security income, earned income, portfolio income, any types of income you have, you ought to know where you fall this year. And if you fall into one of the lower tax brackets and there's some room to work with without tripping over some of the negative things we'll talk about in a moment, then you may want to consider converting some pre-tax assets to Roth. And another great thing about doing that right now is if you convert assets right now to Roth, you're doing it during a downturn so that when we do see that recovery and when the market does pop back up, you get to ride that roller coaster back up the mountain on the Roth side, the tax-free side of the equation.
Yeah, definitely. While the values are compressed, this is a great time to get more bang for the buck out of those conversions. There are some tripwires you've got to be careful about. I always talk about the taxability of Social Security, your Medicare premiums. If you think about, you just have to make sure, because there's so many different things that you can actually trip over while you're doing these strategies, but it does make sense to definitely measure twice, cut once, and take advantage of this while we're in these volatile years. This is another one of those silver lining opportunities in a year that might be a troubled year. Another thing to look at, this one's kind of a contrarian thing, because you just heard us talk about capital gain avoidance.
Yeah.
And here I am, I'm going to tell you, some people, they might want to actually accelerate their capital gains, because a little known thing in the tax policy is that if you're a single person with your income being less than $41,675 or a married couple with income less than $83,350, you fall into a 0% capital gains rate. That's right, 0%. It's free. So there's potential, if you're in a low income situation, you can actually accelerate capital gains and pay zero taxes on that. You ought to look into it.
So maybe you're that person who grandma or grandpa left some stock to you one day and that's blown up, or your parents put stock in your name and your baby, and you have these huge embedded gains that you've never been able to do anything with. Or maybe you had that mutual fund that you bought at the right time and it has this huge gain. If you fall into this 0% capital gains rate, it does give you a really interesting opportunity to be able to exit that in this year if you've already utilized all of your capital losses. So make sure, if you are in one of those income brackets, you don't do something that would potentially cause you to trip over that and cause your capital gains to become taxable. It's a really important thing to make sure you keep track of if you're anywhere near those limits.
Yeah, especially if you're retired. I mean, I've just gone through 2 of these for clients where we were trying to figure out, is this a Roth conversion year or is this a zero capital gains year? You know, because it's kind of an either or, and we did a full tax projection. Go do that for yourself too. I think there's a lot of value in trying to figure out, are there some unique planning opportunities in this volatile financial year? And then we put this one in here, another one. This is another procrastinator's delight, is retirement plans. We want to make sure that, you realize those salary deferrals, you can only put those in by 12/31. Now look, the profit sharing and some of the other things, if you own the company, can go back retroactively to the previous tax year, but your personal contributions, the salary deferrals, have to go in by 12/31. And this also brings up a point, Bo. Solo 401ks.
Oh yeah, yep.
Look, most people, like when you go get your taxes done next year, if you're self-employed, really the only tool you have to go backwards is a SEP IRA. They will say, okay, good news, we can deduct, we'll set up a SEP IRA. We'll be able to, deduct, basically the employer will provide, the small company you own will make a contribution to a retirement account, and it'll be somewhere between 20-25% of the profit, capped out at, $61,000
I think so for
this year?
Yep.
So that's what will happen, but since we're still in 2022, you have the opportunity. You could set up a solo 401k if you meet all the criteria. Look, there's some things you got to do because remember, success does create complication. Sure. But you not only get to do that amount that went in for profit sharing, the 20-25% of income, you also get to do that $20,500 as a salary deferral for you, and if your spouse works in the business, also for them. There's a lot of things, but it has to be set up before that 12/31 deadline.
And the other thing that we see, and we see this all the time, every now and then they increase how much you can put into a 401k as a salary deferral. Well, perhaps you were set up a couple of years ago to max out at $19,500, and you didn't realize that the limits increased to $20,500. A really good thing to do right now is go look at your most recent pay stub or go look at your 401k account and just say, hey, am I actually on track to max out? And while you're doing that, recognize they just increased the limits for next year. So you should go ahead and start doing the math to think about, come January 1, how do I need to adjust my withholdings to make sure that I don't just withhold $20,500 next year, I actually withhold the $22,500 that it's going to for 2023.
And for all my 1973 people out there, remember, because there's going to be a big inflation adjustment on those catch-ups and so forth. It's not when you actually have your birthday. It's the year that you turn 50 that you can actually make that. So January, it doesn't matter if your birthday's in December. If you were born in December of 73, it doesn't matter. You can go to January of 2023 and start doing those catch-up contributions.
All right, so we've said you need to know your history. We've said that you need to recognize there's some tax planning that can still be done. Here's the third thing that you can do before year end. And this one breaks my heart a little bit because I believe so often people just gloss through it. And it's don't ignore open enrollment. When you're at your job and you get that HR email that says, hey, open enrollment's opened up, you got to go in and make your selections. Far too many of my friends and peers just go default to, oh yeah, here's what I did last year. Whatever I did last year, I'm just do that again. And they don't recognize how much of a benefit the benefits at work can be to your overall financial plan.
Well, it's back to we're busy year end. We got a lot of holidays that get stacked in between Thanksgiving, between Christmas. So I think a lot of people, because you're getting pulled in all these directions, you're like, oh, heck, I see this disclosure from my employer. I'll just
get through it.
I'll just get through it. But you are overlooking a very powerful thing. Because remember, we've done so many shows on health savings accounts. And I love health savings accounts. You do have to have a high deductible health plan, which means that you are going to carry a lot of the cost of what your health care is through that health savings account. Maybe that's not the perfect thing for you. Maybe you plan on having a child in this upcoming year. Maybe you ought to look really extra hard. Should I do the PPO version where they're going to cover a lot more of my medical expenses because I know I'm going to be really leaning hard on those benefits next year? Pay attention to those life decisions because there's a reason they offer open enrollment. It's your chance to basically predict what's going to happen in the next year and maximize the opportunity.
Yeah, so let's talk about, and you already alluded to one of them, what are some of the biggest open enrollment decisions? You've already said the first one, most often it's health insurance. And don't just assume that what you did last year is what you should do this year. Maybe you're someone who's entering into having a new baby in the next year, and that's going to change what your healthcare needs look like. And when that happens, you might want to adjust. Okay, I don't need to do the high deductible plan. I want to go for the Cadillac plan, or whatever your circumstance may be. Maybe you have kids that are aging out and flying out of the nest, and so you need to go from family coverage down to individual coverage or individual and spouse coverage. Make sure you understand the different options that are available to you going into the next year.
Well, think about dental and vision. Something always, I think you got to pay attention. Anybody who's got kids of a certain age, you know what I'm talking about here. Orthodontics. It seems like we strap braces on every kid that comes out these days.
It is like right on the cusp.
So
for
I
me.
want to encourage you, go read, if you have dental insurance, go make sure you go read the fine print, because some of these will require you to be part of the dental plan for like a year before you qualify for orthodontics. So just make sure you go read the fine print, because vision, dental, these are not a kind of something that's in everybody's health insurance. So if you do have these options, you ought to at least make sure, am I going to elect this year, or am I going to opt out of it this year? Pay attention to your life situation, pay attention to what they're offering, and try to figure out where the intersection is.
And look, we always talk about health savings accounts. They're a fantastic option for folks who are eligible to do that. But don't forget, maybe if you're not someone who has a health savings account, do you have a flexible spending account available through your open enrollment, available through your health insurance? Or do you have other types of accounts, like a dependent care flexible spending account, that perhaps you could be taking advantage of?
Yeah, you don't get to typically do a flexible spending account and a health savings account at the same time, except for, remember, those dependent care benefits, you can have both a high deductible HSA as well as the dependent care part of the FSA. They do work together. That's one of those special options that they strap in there. And it is important because, look, childcare is expensive. I mean, especially in this inflationary period, because you know that price is going up just like everything else is. See if there's a benefit, because not only do you get a tax deduction on what is getting withheld out of your paycheck and then getting paid directly, you're saving the Medicare, you're saving the Social Security. There's a lot of benefits to both you and the employer for maximizing this opportunity.
And then, Brian, do you want to talk a little bit about, one of the big differences between flexible spending accounts and health savings accounts is that HSAs can carry over year over year. Well, if you're someone who's been funding a flexible spending account throughout this year, but you haven't burned through those expenses, this is the time of year where you may want to use those dollars so that you don't lose those dollars.
That's why a lot of people with flexible spending accounts will typically go do all their vision appointments. They're like, oh man, I still have extra money. So I guess instead of just getting reading glasses, I'm also going to go buy some new Ray-Bans, and all the other, because you see it. I mean, people will do that where they're loading it up because it's use it or lose it. Pay attention to those numbers to make sure you don't leave anything on the table. It's different though with HRAs and HSAs, because those do get to roll over. It is one of those things where, because remember, with HSAs, when we do those deep dives on that, there's only 4% of the population that's actually taking advantage of all three tax advantages. It's not only, because most people do the tax deduction, but the fact of letting it grow tax deferred and the fact that you can pull it out tax free on all the growth does require you to invest some of that money for the long term. So pay attention to that part of it as well.
Another thing that you should pay attention to when you're working through your open enrollment decision making are the insurances available, like disability and life insurance. A lot of employers will offer employer-sponsored life insurance. Perhaps there's some free portion, there's some portion that you can opt into. It makes sense to understand how that works and if that does make sense for your situation.
And then always pay attention to if you're in these high-hat deferred comp, anything, if you're a high-income individual, you're in that tippity-top tax bracket right now. But especially if you're one of these people that's retiring in your 50s or 60s, you're going to go from the tippity-top tax bracket probably to a lower tax bracket if all of a sudden you retire and you're 20-plus years from even being required to pull out of your retirement account. Why not defer some of that income through your employer plan so that it serves as that bridge account? Because a lot of people are nervous. How am I going to pay for health care? How am I going to pay for all these things between 55 to 65? A deferred comp plan could really be a powerful bridge to get you through that. And if you're an executive level type person, you want to look at that. But look, there's risk. This is why this is probably a graduate to the next level, an abundance cycle where you hire financial advisors, because Well, look, deferred comps are on the company's balance sheet, meaning that if there's any type of peril for the company financially, you would lose that income if they went to bankruptcy or any type of restructuring. So pay attention to that. But it could be, if you're in a stable enough company, a really powerful thing for your long-term retirement.
But also make sure when you're making these elections, specifically around deferred comp and pushing bonuses into the future, make sure you have a strategy for your deferral. I have a dear friend who they have been participating, they work for a large company, have been participating in the deferred comp for years. And they were thinking about the current year tax savings. It's wonderful. I put money in, I can defer it into the future. They weren't thinking about the distribution options. They were just saying, oh, I'll just lump sum when I retire, lump sum when I retire. Well, they did this for like 8, 9, 10 years. And as you can imagine, the number got pretty big.
Point.
When they retire, in the year that they retire, they're going to have a huge issue because all that deferred comp money is going to pay out. It's going to blow them into the next tax bracket. And while, yes, that's a wonderful problem to have, it's something that can be avoided through good planning. So make sure, even though it might seem like the payout dates are way far in the future, make sure you have a plan for it so that you're not setting yourself up for some unintended consequences in the future.
Yeah, I like creating essentially a ladder strategy, usually where you're pushing them out every 5 years so that you get a nice little 5-year bridge. Yep. There's a lot of cool things you can do with these deferred comps. One thing I quickly overlooked was, like we talked about life insurance and disability.
Perfect.
One of the things, disability, remember, you always want to pay that with after-tax money because if you pay it with after-tax, don't take on, everybody wants to save the FICA and the Social Security and Medicare, but if you pay it with after-tax, if you ever are disabled, you will get those benefits completely tax-free. So pay attention to that. Also, life insurance through your employer. Life insurance, we think it's very important, to have life insurance to replace your income. Your employer very well could offer you $50,000 free because that's what the IRS kind of lets you do. Lets the employer fully deduct that if they give it to their employees. But I always remind people, if you're unhealthy, you're going to love your group life insurance if you're a smoker or if you have other type of health concerns, because they're basically looking at the pool of your entire workforce to underwrite you to a degree. Whereas if you're super healthy, if you're out there, like I know we have a whole group back here that's about to start training for a marathon or half marathon. I'm trying to convince them to do half marathon, not full marathon, because of what I've seen people get hurt doing full marathons. But those people, they're gonna be in the shape of their life.
Yep.
It's gonna be better for them to buy life insurance themselves.
That's exactly right.
Because when you're super healthy, you want to be based off of your life. So just understand those unique things. But like I said, if you're somebody who's got some health issues, group life insurance could be a really valuable tool for you.
And then the last thing we want you to be aware of and think of as you're making your open enrollment decisions is a lot of times big companies will offer legal services or advisory services. It's not uncommon for the company that you work for to say, hey, if you need to get your wills done, we have an attorney we've partnered with, we'll cover the cost of that. Or maybe you have a financial advisor that you work with, we will actually provide you a benefit, we'll pay the advisory fees for you. So if you work for a company where that's available, make sure you're not just walking away from free money, because that, just like your employer match, is very much a way to tap into the free money available through your benefits program.
Bo, I want to talk about number 4. Okay. This one's the most powerful to me because we always talk about begin with the end in mind. Yep. And I think that when you do the research studies on who is successful and who's not successful, planning is in the DNA of the people who are extremely successful. And that part gets missed a lot of times. So number 4 for us on things to think about before we reach 2023 is know where you are in your financial journey. And we've actually got some great tools. Number 1, the net worth.
This is one that gets us so excited because we love doing this. I'm always amazed, Brian, whenever we talk to either listeners or friends or even folks that are considering hiring Abound Wealth to be their financial advisor, we always ask the question, hey, where are you? Like, I don't know. I don't know if I'm on track. I don't know if I'm ahead of the curve. I don't know if I'm behind the curve. Well, how can you know where you're going? How can you know if you're moving in the right direction if you don't have a really clear understanding of exactly where you are right now today?
Well, this tool was so powerful for me initially, just as a great communication exercise between me and my wife.
Oh,
and
it's a great
we'd
point.
kind of look at, She doesn't care about finances as much as I do. So this was a great way for us to have a really productive conversation as we look at the net worth every year and looked at compare and contrast what changed, what we're doing well with, what we're struggling with. But guys, I got to tell you, there are some incredible things. If you do this long enough, that it will awaken that invisible inevitability of your future success, because I have found when I start tracking stuff, when I actually start putting numbers to paper, I don't care, because we're in a down year this year. And a lot of you are going to think, well, I don't want to do, because this is now going to be some type of an accounting for the long term of how my wealth is growing. 2022 is the worst year to start because it would go down. It would be, but I would say, no, please embrace even the negative years, because there's so much value when you get to go back and look at the trends. And then I'm going to tell you, just by doing this exercise of planning and documenting is going to have something subliminally happen inside your brain where things just start falling into place a lot easier. That has happened for me. And that's actually what's motivated us to actually try to figure out, how do we actually give people the data points they ought to pay attention to with their net worth? So they're not only just recording their net worth statement, but also having a dashboard tool of which elements to kind of look at to kind of bridge that communication gap even better. And we actually created the net worth tool. We've made it very affordable on purpose, because we want to encourage you to start this activity, create a habit out of this so you can build wealth that much easier.
Yeah, I think it's so interesting, Brian. It's easy for us to all think about like fitness goals. Whenever, all of us at some point in our life have said, you mentioned folks doing a half marathon. I want to run a half marathon in this time, or I want to run a 5K, or I want to lose a few pounds, or I want to fill in the blank. The way that anyone ever starts that journey is they always have to show where they started and then track their progress through time. And as you start to see change, as you start to, look at yourself in the mirror, I see an ab, or I see some definition. I see something I did not see before. It gives you that staying power to stay the course. That's what we wanted the net worth tool to be, so that you can actually see the journey that you are on and know, okay, the decisions I'm making matter. And ultimately, they're moving me towards where I want to be in the long term. We think it's an amazing tool to help you do this. If you don't have it, if you've not used it, go check it out at learn.moneyguy.com.
And that leads to the second tool, because realize the whole purpose of all this was just to, how do we accelerate people's success? And the net worth dashboard was such a powerful tool to enable people to kind of know where they stand. But then a lot of people, I think that leads them further into the questioning, because they're at that point where they're do-it-yourselfers. They think down the road they're working through the abundance cycle, that they're going to turn their simple life into a complex life at some point financially, but they're just not there. But you start saying, but I still need to know, what's my number? What am I trying to save for? How do my goals intersect with the number I'm actually trying to save for financial independence, for future things I'm trying to accomplish? So we were like, let's meet that need. So we came actually up with the course and tool of Know Your Number as well. And guys, we were talking about it in our show prep, because Bo and I, we craft this stuff, we record it, we create the tools, but then we do get removed from knowing how the sales process is going. But Reby and Daniel and the rest of the team have been very good at saying, no, the feedback has been phenomenal. I think we've even had people sharing that they didn't realize that this was askew in their budget, or that this much of their income was not turning into actually investable assets or net worth, because we have that whole illustration component built into it. This is something that will help give you direction when you're in those stages where you haven't graduated to the level of needing a full financial advisor yet.
Yeah, I love it, because if the net worth tool tells you where you are today, Know Your Number should give you the idea of the horizon that you're working towards. I know where I am today. How do I know where I'm going? And what we try to do is we try to make it chock full of all kinds of useful information. There are even some deliverables available inside of the Know Your Number course that aren't available on our resource page, like showing, okay, hey, if I'm this age and I save this percent, how much of my income can I replace? And what happens if I increase that? Or what happens if I decrease that? How do I know where and how I'm tracking? Because at the end of the day, we want to empower you to be able to impact your financial life so that ultimately you really can build that great, big, beautiful tomorrow.
Up on the screen, you have it right now. Part of the Know Your Number course is one of these illustrations that we were like, man, this is too powerful not to share, because look, we made a list recently of all these great systems, and it makes me so happy when I see systems that have been around since the 90s and then they throw the financial order of operations in there. I'm like, man, our message is getting out. It's working. But then people always, because this one pointed out, it said, the Money Guy Show and the financial order of operations has the highest savings and investment rate out of all these other systems, because like think about Ramsey Solutions, Dave's at 15%. We're consistently 20 to 25%. And people are like, man, that's a higher number. Why? What are you guys doing that makes you think that you need that higher number? We, just like we eat our own cooking, we also show you the numbers. We actually open up the books to the math. So we've actually got this illustration that shows you, it's right on the screen right now, of by age that you start saving and investing, if you look at your savings percentage rate, how much of your income will actually be replaced at a traditional retirement? And you'll quickly see that there is a matrix of answers here that the sooner you start, look, because a 20-year-old that's saving 10%,
they're probably going to be okay.
Yeah, you're going to be okay because you started at 20 years old. But I know a lot of people. You might have just discovered the Money Guy Show and you're 33 years old, or you just discovered the Money Guy Show and you're 40 years old, and you go, man, 10% ain't going to do the same thing it would have done for me when I was 20. What's the real number now? And we can show you, look, that's why 20% for a 30-year-old is going to get you 95%. If you're a 35-year-old and you do 25%, it's going to replace 84% of your income in retirement. You can quickly see how you can go from what's the danger area, what's the green good area, so you can figure out what's the right savings and investment rate for you.
Like most things in life, if you're willing to put in a little bit of extra time, devote a little bit extra attention, it's amazing what an impact that can have. So as we think about winding down this year, as we think about closing out 2022, if you can clue in on these 4 things, knowing your history, understanding what tax savings and tax opportunities are available to you, recognizing you have benefits through your employment through open enrollment, and then having an assessment of where you are today, there's a really good chance you're going to set yourself up for whatever 2023 holds so that you'll be better well positioned to go build your great, big, beautiful tomorrow.
Everything we do is to try to accelerate your success, because I really do believe what I love about what we've created here with the Money Guy Show is that we're not asking a lot from you until you have shown results and success. I think that's the most powerful thing that can occur, is that you come and get loved on with this learn, apply, grow. That is the abundance cycle. And that's why I encourage you, keep consuming all of our free stuff. But if you recognize, man, this stuff is taking, something inside of me is changing, I feel the evolution of me becoming more and more of a financial mutant, I want to encourage you to speed that process up by going to look at some of the tools and courses we've created as well with learn.moneyguy.com. And then you will, I know, because you reach out to us constantly all across the country, you're going to reach that level of success. You're like, I'm there. I've graduated to the level of abundance now and success. What you guys have been sharing since 2006 has worked, that I need to actually have a co-pilot, that personal CFO that's going to help walk me through. We love what we do.
Absolutely.
I mean, I shared with the team as I was driving into work today, I was thinking about the difference between just being a successful small business owner or a business person that gets to do work and make money, good money. That's a powerful thing. But what's fulfilling is when you actually get to create something and then see people actually use that to change their life. I kind of was smiling as I was driving to work because I love recording days, because it really does make me feel so energized and empowered that what we do is changing your life. I mean, and there's no bigger, when you guys come and do the studio tours, when we meet you out in public, I mean, that stuff just gives me goosebumps and gets me all excited, because we are changing the financial world, and you can be part of it with checking out all of our stuff. So thank you so much for subscribing. Thank you for everybody who's buying the courses and the tools, and thank you for everybody who graduates to the next level and actually becomes a client. We're going to keep doing what we do. So I'm your host, Brian Preston, Mr. Bo Hansen, for the rest of the Money Guy team. Money Guy team out.